Rapaziada, eu tô aqui com vocês no The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered de novo. Deixa eu até ver o horário que eu tô gravando isso. 4h23 da manhã, olha que maravilha. Tô um pouco gripado, mas isso não é sobre isso que eu vim falar com vocês hoje. Hoje eu vou gravar os episódios extras pra vocês. As fases perdidas. E vamos começar aqui com Jackson. Festa em Jackson. Tomada de nervosismo, Ellie vai a uma festa em Jackson. Essa fase é apresentada em um estado pré-alfa inacabado, refletindo seu estado quando foi cortado do jogo originalmente. O nível não contém diálogo falado, apenas falas temporárias mostradas como legenda. Então, resumindo aqui para vocês, isso daqui era para estar no jogo. Essas três fases eram para estar no jogo, mas não estão. E por isso que vai ter algumas coisas que não foram feitas, tipo animações e falas. Tá. Eu vou deixar o vídeo de introdução só nesse só, daí nos outros eu vou tirar porque é o mesmo vídeo. Então vambora.
You're about to play an unfinished level from The Last of Us Part 2.
Lost levels, Jackson Party.
The reason we added this section is there are a few sequences, and we picked the 3 of the best ones, that we cut from the game. You know, often we build a game that's much bigger than what ends up being the final product. They were months away from being finished, but we wanted to give you an insight of what it's like when we built a game, because often we have this whole thing constructed and it doesn't have final art or audio or dialogue. And here you get to see the building blocks of what it's like when we first string a bunch of these levels together. This is the intro to the first deleted level, and this one is the roughest of the 3. We wanted to show more of how Jackson operates. So this is the festival where Ellie ultimately kisses Dina. This sequence would have come very late in the game as a flashback sequence while you're in the farm with Dina. And we wanted to show what is the rest of Jackson doing, and wanted to put on the stick, make it interactive. So you could see when you're outside, there are all these almost like carnival games that you can play. You could mix drinks, you could play with these kids that are playing a sort of clicker Marco Polo, sit down and listen to conversations. And all the different interactions were first or second pass, very, very early passes. The building blocks are there, but nothing is final. And ultimately, while we were very excited by this sequence, it's pretty fun and lighthearted. It just slowed things too much as we're barreling towards the end of the story at this point. So again, reminder, rough, missing audio, missing animation, missing gameplay tweaks, missing dialogue, but pretty representative of what it would have been. So enjoy.
Eu tossi aí sem querer, me desculpe. Aqui a gente vai acompanhar mais as legendas, tá? Porque não tem diálogo. Eu acho que eu vou ter que ver esse videozinho todo começo de fase, porque ele fala algo diferente, eu acho. É estranho, né? Vamos ver.
Originally, this level was going to transition us to farm. We would go all the way through to the dance, where Ellie and Dina share their first kiss. Then we would play through farm, and when Ellie plays the guitar at night, she would remember the Seth incident. So, the opening for this was a little tricky. We needed it to match at least a little what you might expect emotionally coming from prior beats, because we were already purposefully disorienting you in time and space. Remember, you just came from this huge fight. To jump straight into it would have been a little too jarring. After some back and forth, we rooted it in Ellie's nerves, calling back to her hands shaking in the theater. But this time, for a much more innocuous reason we'll find out later. She's nervous because she has a crush on Dina, who is the only reason why she's here at the dance.
Então essa parte aqui, ela viria logo após a briga da Abby e da Ellie. Quando teve flashback lá no meu episódio, acho que foi 23, que foi a briga das duas. Teve flashback lá do Joe empurrando o cara lá e tudo mais. E a Ellie falando que não precisava da ajuda dele. Então seria entre, tipo, a gameplay seria antes desse flashback.
Something we really wanted to do was highlight the way their lives had turned upside down since she went down this path. We had this idea of recontextualizing all of our usual gameplay mechanics that were designed for really violent ends. The workbench, door bashes, throwable weapons, and even the infected, which is my personal favorite. Peppered throughout the level are moments of levity or shared history, all the while seeing how happy and mundane they all were before her huge revenge odyssey.
Legal. Olha a criança movimentando o instalador, velho.
This is one of my favorite sections because I think that it achieves both the slice of life aspect of Jackson while also being a stark reminder of how dark the world that they live in really, really is. To attract attention and curiosity, one of the kids was supposed to make this adorable, messed up little clicker impression, and the others would giggle. We tried a version where if you got close enough, the kid might try to follow you a little before turning back. Since clickers are blind and move by echolocation, for this game of messed up tag, Ellie must close her eyes and listen for when the children give themselves away. The thought was that these kids are in relative safety. They still grow up with the dangers of clickers and runners, and all those lessons would embed themselves in the games that they play. When the festival got cut, they tried to preserve this moment and move it to the front of the game where the snowball fight is, as a tutorial. However, being in the headspace of a clicker doesn't really teach you how to deal with them. Eventually, it evolved, and they instead made the snowball fight, which was, I think, way more effective. For me, it's character illuminating that not only does Ellie know this game, she plays along. There's a familiarity with the kids that's really nice to see, especially because it's such a difference from the Ellie we see later, who has a sort of hollow normalcy that she's trying to get with JJ, but kind of fails.
Nesses diálogos, porque eu gosto de ouvir. Eu joguei essas fases, mas não explorei tanto que eu vou fazer agora.
It is not a festival without one of these throwing games. This one, of course, uses our throwable system where you're often chucking explosive things or stunning things, but for a more wholesome purpose, although some people take this game seriously. A fun aspect of this is if you did well, you could win a toy here. Ellie would place it in her pocket. If you had done this, you'd find the toy with JJ, the baby, later back at the farm. When we cut this, the toy made it through anyway because it was so cute. It is the same one you see on the tractor at the farm. Ollie the elephant.
Ah, lembram do Ollie, o elefantezinho que a gente acha no trator? De acordo com o que a mulher falou, a gente ia ganhar ele aqui pra dar pro JJ mais pra frente. Legal.
The makeup artist is pretty simple. It's one of those little in-game scenes we peppered in to make it feel like Ellie had roots in the town. Hallie, our writer, mentioned that in her mind, an ex-girlfriend of Ellie's tattooed her arm to cover up her scar. So we figured this might be the only time you get to see that. We wanted to hint at it and allude to it and make it feel like there had been so much more that had been happening and so much more that Ellie threw away.
Legal. Ah, não vai ficar, né? Não vai ficar porque não foi terminada. Legal. Vamos ver se tem mais alguma coisa. Ah, aqui, esse joguinho. Vamos ver se eu consigo. Olha! Toma. Aê, porra. Tô boa, caralho. Cadê? Tem mais coisa pra ver, não tem? Aqui, ó. Ali, ó. Ali tem mais um negocinho pra ver.
There's a hidden spot at the back that was just a bit of fun. It was highlighting Jackson's normalcy with something we would find in a real world. In the back, you would find teenagers finding some alone time with each other in a dark corner of a party. It was rewarding the player for peeking into a hidden corner, but ultimately redirecting them back to the festival. We also had versions of them smoking weed here, despite Maria's consternation, probably having gotten it from Eugene.
Entendi, ali é meio que um cantinho proibido. Aí a Ellie ia ali pra, tipo, espantar ele sem querer. E possivelmente ia ter um troféu pra isso. Ah não, peraí. Começar o diálogo depois eu
We
misturo
use
a
our
bebida.
workbench a lot to make a lot of things that kill and maim and hurt people.
Ah, que legal.
Here, we had the silly idea of using
Misturar
the
o
same
whisky,
feel,
tomar um whisky.
harkening back to the same animations, using the exact same UI to instead fix a drink. Like the workbench, you could pick your base, and then you could add something to it. And at the time, we had some different reactions from Ellie based on how strong you chose to make the drink. Something we wanted to prototype, though, before it got cut, was picking up some ingredients around to add, like a lime or maybe a bottle of someone's favorite whiskey or salt, like you were earning upgrades. We also toyed with having Ellie carry around the drink you made and occasionally sip it, psyching herself up to go talk to Dina inside because she's nervous. It got too noodly though, because she would need to keep placing it somewhere before she did anything. So it would have ended up more trouble than it was worth.
Eles iam dar uma mecânica da gente ir atrás de coisas pra misturar na nossa bebida. Eu não vou sentar aqui, vou direto pra lá, porque aqui não vai ter mais nada. Mas legal isso, cara. Um monte de coisa que eles poderiam ter adicionado no jogo final, mas não adicionaram. É meio triste.
Rapaziada, eu tô aqui rapidinho só pra passar e avisar vocês que eu tomei direito autoral por conta dessa parte aqui da fase que tem a música. Mas é isso. Se vocês estiverem ouvindo música no fundo é porque meu vizinho tá escutando música muito alto. E é só isso, tá, rapaziada? No resto tá tudo de boa. Falou.
Que top, velho. Bem legal. Vamos pro esgoto de Seattle agora? Eu vou deixar o videozinho. Aproveitei um videozinho. A tela de carregamento no Play 5 é foda, hein? Ah, mas é rápido. Lost Levels. Seattle Sewer.
In this second deleted level, which is an extended sequence of the sewers in Seattle, this comes on the heels of where Ellie goes into a building and she survives an attack by stalkers and gets thrown out of the window and gets swept away by the current, and then we cut this section that used to be there in the final game. Now you will get to play it. So this was a way to get a bit more interesting puzzles, interesting traversal, figure out how Ellie can navigate the sewers with the fighting current. Ultimately, with a lot of these levels and these sequences, the reason why we cut them were for pacing purposes. But here it is for you in this very kind of raw form that part of it will feel finished, parts of it will feel like assets are missing as far as audio, animation won't be final. But it's a glimpse into what a game looks like when it's months away from finishing. Enjoy.
Ah tá, essa fase já é diferente da outra. Essa fase aqui já tá mais completa do que a última.
Sai de cima de mim!
Ah, tá do lado pelo menos. Você tá indo. Deixa eu ver se a fase. Caralho. Não vai conseguir. Aí ó, aqui já tá diferente, pô.
Tá.
Aí já tá bem diferente. Assim que ele falou que não daria pra gente.
The ladder acts as an immediate goal for the player, but being able to climb out is not going to be so easy. To keep levels interesting and engaging, we alternate between positive and negative values the player experiences. Here, it's a positive to have found the ladder, but then a negative to discover it's not the solution. But then another positive to identify the next short-term goal of the doorway. By alternating between these opposing values, we give players what they expect, but not how they expect it. This level, internally known as Fine Laura, was quite long in duration as we had to make Ellie traverse a far distance to the opposite side of downtown Seattle. The sewer section was originally longer than what we released the game with, approximately 10 minutes more. This was one of the few areas of the game that used water flow as part of a traversal puzzle. The player has to go upstream to use the current to get to the platform to reach the other side. We mostly cut this mechanic game-wide, however it remained in essence in the section swimming to the aquarium as Ellie, when we were avoiding the waves.
Aqui ele falou que a gente usaria mais o fluxo das ondas para fazer puzzle.
Throughout the rest of the level, we also used light to indicate to the player that they were heading in the right direction. At each turn, however, we blocked the direct route forward. Players would know that they just have to keep finding alternative paths, promoting those feelings of being desperate and trapped. We slowly introduced the player to consider climbing into smaller pipes and crouching in these tight spaces. This
só
is to
continuar
slowly
subindo
build
e
up
sair.
to and encourage. We added a tiny space just to reward the player's exploration with a pickup item, and we made sure it was something that made sense that you'd find in this area. A canister and all the garbage that had been washed into the sewers from the surface.
Acho que ia colocar mais coisas escondidas do que tinha. E ali atrás também falou que eles cortaram
We love the
bastante
idea of
coisa.
making Ellie prone through a tiny, dirty pipe in order to get out,
Certo.
as it was a great opportunity
Não
to use
perde a
our prone
cabeça,
mechanic.
Ellie.
A unique camera setup was created to support crawling in these pipes, as the standard prone camera is much higher above the player. We also created custom collision in order for Ellie to manoeuvre in these tight spaces easily. Initially, the oblong collision capsule around her character caused issues crawling around corners. We put extra effort into the custom corner collision, so the movement experience is as smooth as the main game.
Eles tinham feito isso aqui para justamente aproveitar essa nova mecânica de deitar.
Aqui é um lugar bem merda pra morrer.
Triste saber que eles não colocaram isso no final do game.
Originally, we had the waterline much higher here, so players had to swim through this tight tunnel. However, from watching user test feedback, it was occasionally causing people to discount the route entirely and turn back on themselves. So to avoid any risk of this happening in the final game, we present a lower water level so the tunnel is easy to see and commit to using. Although this isn't as impactful without the prone swim, it's the better decision as it means a smooth experience for the player with no backtracking frustration. We draw the player towards this pipe as it is seemingly the route out of the tight space. Fairly soon it's obvious that this path is blocked. If the player goes all the way up to the bars that block the path, they are rewarded with a pickup, so this journey doesn't feel wasted.
Merda.
It's important to encourage the player to try to progress along this path so that they would subtly be thinking of progress in this direction. We hint to the player that there is a bigger, new space beyond this pipe by showing the player the waterfall.
Aqui que
This helps
tem a
players consider
cena
the other
que
route,
eu
but they don't know how
fiquei
far the tunnel is
interessado
or whether they'd
de
make
ver
it.
jogando. Porque aqui a Ellie ainda tá traumatizada com a perda do Joe. E ela vai ver o Joe morto aqui, ó. Olha lá. E ela ainda tá com esse trauma. Então ela vê o cadáver do Joe. Isso é triste, mano.
Ah, merda!
Caralho. Aí agora é a sessão do final do jogo. Literalmente que ele tentaria ir por ali, aí aqui é a sessão que tá no jogo. A gente faz todo esse caminho aqui. Bem suave de fazer.
Using this pipe was retained in the iteration we shipped with, as it's the last of the extreme methods Ellie has to undergo in order to escape the sewers, and what she will go through in her pursuit of revenge.
Legal.
The last ladder climb is quite lengthy, and although we could have trimmed it down to a shorter climb, we liked how this last segment of the journey built anticipation for whether there was success at the top or not after all you've been through. Ultimately, the ladder exits out into the subway station, which is how it connects in the final game. Ellie then has to find her way to the hospital from here, crossing paths with the scars for the first time.
Aí aqui já é o final já. Legal. Vamos pro terceiro e último, né? A caçada. Esse aqui eu acho que não é meu favorito, mas me dá uma certa agonia esse aqui.
For this third and final deleted level, what we call the boar hunt sequence, this was a sequence pretty late in the game. It was right after the whole Seattle Abby sequence where Abby spares Ellie. And then we wanted to come back into Ellie's story, but keep it a bit mysterious of how much time has passed, where is Ellie now? So we're coming in on Ellie and she's following a trail of blood. And we wanted to mirror in a way the deer hunt sequence from the first game, but this time do it with a boar. And there's something with Ellie that now she can't let go of this violence. She's pursuing it, even against this innocent animal. This was another opportunity to show how the violence that Ellie has experienced, the violence that she witnessed being afflicted onto Joel, is still sticking with her, and she's still experiencing these PTSD moments. This was a sequence that was pretty far along and was cut pretty late in production. Parts of it are still really rough, but the gameplay, the building blocks were all there. I think you'll have fun to see, like, again, a rough, unfinished sequence that you can play. You can see all the way to the end, and including a cinematic that we end up cutting. And the remnants of the sequence ended up being mentioned in Ellie's journal. So this part of the story that we developed still made its way into the game as kind of optional stuff that you could read about, but here you get to experience it. So as a reminder, this is pretty rough, months away from being finished, but you get to see it now.
Vocês poderiam ter levado pouquinho mais de uns 3 meses, né, pra fazer.
So the boar hunt was one of the hardest levels for me to work on. It was a huge challenge with the systems that we had, and we kept trying, but it never felt quite right. Originally, the level happened after the Jackson Festival, which also got cut, but before Farm. Once the festival got cut, it became the prologue to Farm. The intended experience is that we jump forward in time after the fight with Abby in the theater. We don't know where Dina is. We likely assume she's dead because she was just bleeding out. Ellie is alone. Her hair is short. So maybe this is the future or the present. And she's hunting. Hunting who? Abby still?
Entendi. Aqui eles queriam meio que enganar a gente logo depois da luta da Abby e da Ellie. Ia ser isso aqui.
In early iterations of the fight, it was more arena-like. The player slowly whittles down the boar's health. Ellie gets more visceral and more vicious. We get a little worried about her. As the boar gets weaker, more panicked, more feral, and we start feeling sympathetic to the boar, was the hope. In all of these iterations, especially of these wider areas, it required custom AI and scripting to make sure it continued to feel organic as an animal, but we really needed it to do specific stuff. It needed to be able to close distances really, really quickly. It needed to charge to attack, but we wanted the feeling of hunting, so we needed to track it down from afar. And we also needed to, we must have gone through 5 or 6 iterations of the boar fight and all, and every single time it changed pretty drastically. We split it into clear phases, where one was like all long range. We tried another where you're getting close and you get the jump on it quite literally. You're jumping off of a rock to attack it. And then finally, we tried a bunch where the gas station was built to highlight the boar's destructiveness. Since it's cramped, the boar feels larger. We also feel trapped with it, though perhaps it's trapped with us. When it charges, it gets to us quickly, so we must be on our toes. This made it more aligned with Ellie's sort of hunting for trouble mindset. Listening became more important, as well as moving around slowly. Could you spot it before it saw or heard you? And could you get a shot off quickly enough so you could dodge out of the way? Or is the shot worth the cost after? It feels like by the end of the fight, everything would likely be in shambles. The boar would burst through the back, and Ellie would follow it and finally enact revenge. The boar kill was supposed to be anything but glorious, with the boar whimpering at the back of the gas station after Ellie's relentless...
Aqui ela vai lembrar do Joe, isso que é foda. O grito do Joe. Nossa, lembrando dele tudo. Aí acaba aqui. Foi rapidinho até gravar os 3. Mas é isso, rapaziada. Esses são os 3 episódios perdidos. As fases perdidas. E agora esperem pro último vídeo da The Last of Us Part 2, que vai ser jogando modo sem volta com o Joel. Eu acho que eu já vou emendar direto aqui, mas é isso. Espero que vocês tenham gostado das 3 fases. Eu achei bem interessante o conceito delas. Eu queria muito que elas teriam ido pra fase final do jogo. Seria bem legal até. Mas é isso. Espero que vocês tenham gostado e até o próximo vídeo.